Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.
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 Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast with me, Dr. Janine Anderson. Heads up, this show may contain adult language and may mention specific foods. If you find either of those to be too triggering, I trust you to take care of yourself and do what you need to do. This podcast is sponsored by Ipono Maui and ED Care. Ipono Maui is led by internationally renowned expert on eating disorders, Dr. Anita Johnston. Located in a home-like oceanfront facility in beautiful Maui, Hawaii, Ipono offers residential, partial hospitalization, and intensive outpatient treatment for eating disorders. Visit iponomaui.com, spelled AIPONOMAUI, to learn more. ED Care has provided PHP, IOP, and outpatient treatment for all genders 18 and over since 2001. CAMSA, which stands for Connection, Acceptance, Mindfulness, Sense of Self, and Action, is ED Care's mindfulness-based treatment approach and is incorporated into each individualized treatment plan. Facilities are located in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Kansas City, and all treatment is supported by master's-level clinicians or higher. ED Care offers 4 specialty tracks for binge eating disorder, elite athletes, substance use, and trauma. And the Connections House, an affordable supportive housing component, adds an extra layer of supervised support. Visit eatingdisorder.care or call 866-771-0861.
Hey everybody, I'm really excited to be back with you all. This is season 4 of the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast. I want to take a second to thank you all for your continued support and listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you all and love getting to know you and reading all your emails and just connecting with you. I also want to take a second to thank my sponsors for their renewed sponsorship of the podcast. They really help me to be able to produce the podcast and to be able to afford things like an editor, which really helps me cut down on the time so I can get more episodes out. I also wanted to let you know that this week is NEDA week of 2018. So it's the last week in February, going into the first week in March. So it's National Eating Disorder Awareness Week here in the US. And this is put on by the National Eating Disorders Association. To celebrate NEDA Week, I wanted to let you guys know about a couple of things. One, that you should connect with NEDA on social media, check out all their events, and find all of their resources. There's a lot of great stuff out there this week in particular. Second, to celebrate NEDA Week, I'm going to put out 3 episodes this week, coming out all 3 days in a row. So today is the first one. Tomorrow we'll have an episode with Dr. Anita Johnston about creating meaning in the recovery process. And then the third one will be about my book. I wanted to let you know that my book is out and available for purchase on Amazon. It's called Recover Your Perspective. It will be available February 27th, 2018. So if you're listening to this, if it is that date or later, the book is available for purchase. That third episode I'm putting out this week is actually going to give you a free chapter of the book read by me to give you a sense of if it would be something that would be helpful for you or not. Today, though, we are talking about spirituality with Dr. Michael Berrett, who is a leader in the field. He's kind of the expert on spirituality and eating disorder recovery. I wanted to let you know that if you don't identify as somebody who believes in a higher power, or you identify as atheist or agnostic, I think this episode is still going to be really helpful for you, and I'd encourage you to try to stay open to it. Neither Dr. Berrett nor I talk about our own personal beliefs, and nobody talks about needing to embrace a higher power or any sort of theistic point of view at all. We talk about it very broadly, including if you feel like being connected to nature is a good form of spirituality for you. So I understand that a lot of people have been wounded by those kind of conversations, and we made a lot of effort to make sure that that wasn't going to get replicated in this episode. Dr. Michael E. Berrett is CEO, Executive Director, and co-founder of Center for Change. He has spent more than 3 decades working with those suffering from eating disorders and co-authored or contributed to several books on the topic, including the APA's book Spiritual Approaches in the Treatment of Women with Eating Disorders and Spiritual Renewal, A Journey of Faith and Healing. Dr. Berrett has also co-authored articles in peer-reviewed professional clinical journals. A nationally recognized presenter and clinical trainer, he has presented at many national conferences including NEDA, IADEP, RunFru, BETA, IECA, NAT, SAP, BFI Summit, and others. Prior to the opening of Center for Change intensive programs in 1994, Dr. Berrett worked in private practice as a psychologist and at the Utah Valley Regional Medical Center in adult and adolescent psychiatry. While at UVRMC, he was the program coordinator for a specialty eating disorder program, and he also served as chief of psychology. He was the clinical director for Aspen Achievement Academy, a residential wilderness program for adolescents, and he has served on the Joint Commission P-TAC committee as a member of the board of directors of the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs. Dr. Berrett has also been adjunct faculty at Brigham Young University in graduate programs in education and counseling psychology. A certified school psychologist and school counselor, Dr. Berrett spent his early career in public education. He received his Ph.D. in counseling psychology with a doctoral minor in marriage and family therapy in 1986. He and his wife Karen are the parents of 8 wonderful children. Dr. Berrett has dedicated his professional life to helping young people navigate the journey of life with wisdom and peace.
Dr. Berrett, thanks for being here.
Thanks for letting me be here. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you in my little treatment center. So today we are talking about potentially spirituality, maybe some self-compassion, the role of love in treatment.
Okay.
I guess I did actually want to talk about spirituality, but I feel like if we start with that, we have to go through the disclaimer for the people who have kind of a reaction to that word. And I guess I just want to reassure all the people listening, like nobody's going to be preaching to you on this episode, so don't worry about it. Tell us how you think about spirituality. Like how would we maybe define that as a term?
Well, first of all, along with what you just said a minute ago, I will also reassure the people listening that, that we all know that religiosity and spirituality are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people confuse that, they get it mixed up, and then it can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. But spirituality is universal, and we're all spiritual, and we need to know that, we need to find that. And if we could figure that out and then use our spiritual beliefs in the interest of and in the benefit of recovery from illness, then we will do better in our recovery. And there's hundreds of research studies that show that that's true. So I just wanted to reaffirm what you said.
Sure. So what might spirituality look like if you don't happen to believe in a higher power of sorts?
Well, my belief is that how many people on the earth? Is it 7 billion or 5 billion?
Something like that.
7 billion. That means there's 7 billion different views of what spirituality is. And even if you took a traditional religious group of people and asked them about their spirituality, if you had 200 people in a congregation, for example, in a religious faith, ask them about their spirituality, they would all tell you something very different. Mm-hmm. Among all the similarities of what they would say, there would be a lot of things different. So spirituality is in the mind and in the heart of the person and the individual. And so I just think we need to understand that and then respect that and try to understand that. So I actually forgot the question you asked me.
We were just talking about kind of defining spirituality if you don't happen to believe in a higher power.
To me, spirituality can be, for many people, what a lot of my clients, when I ask them, what they will say is, my spirituality is nature. Mm-hmm. I love being in nature. That's where I feel connected. That's where I feel peaceful. That's where I'm my best self. It's where I get rejuvenated about what's important in my life. Some people will say yoga, that is my religion. That's my spirituality. It's what I do. Yeah. It keeps me sane. And I've had many patients say that was the key to my recovery. A lot of people will say it's service, loving people, caring for people, doing something for someone, getting outside of myself, humanitarian work, and it's really connected with service. One of the ways I like to think about it, in addition to all those ways, is the idea of living universal spiritual principles which nobody would throw rocks at. In fact, any decent human being on the planet would be likely to agree that they're important. And if we lived by those, all of us, we'd have a more peaceful and a beautiful world to live in as far as the way we treat each other. And those could be things like love, forgiveness, kindness, responsibility, taking responsibility, having integrity, being congruent, extending yourself in behalf of another human being, living by faith and hope the very best that we can.
Yeah.
And I say the word faith not as a religious construct, but as a spiritual principle. So if people had a chance to say, in my mind, this person is a spiritual person, and then somebody else said, in my mind, this person is a spiritual person, and then we kind of distilled it all down, there would be some commonalities, and most of those commonalities, it wouldn't be so much spiritual practices, but it would be living a spiritual life according to principles. And then I guess you could say individually, if a person has principles that they have internalized as important to live by to become the kind of person that they really want to be, then that is one way to look at their spirituality. Yeah. And so part of spirituality, in my opinion, is being congruent the best that we can without perfectionism messing this up for us.
Yeah.
But doing the best we can to be the kind of person we want to be, to not only embrace and accept who we are, but to strive to become who we can be. And that's, I do a lot of speaking and writing about spiritual identity. And in my opinion, spiritual identity includes who we are, and it includes who we might become.
Like our
who we're going to be.
Self.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know if I've answered your question, but
you absolutely have.
spirituality includes love and light and living by the heart and following impression and doing good in the world. And that's just my opinion. But and also, I just want to say this. We live in an age where, especially in the world of psychotherapy, where any spirituality is easily embraced except theistic spirituality. And so, which I personally don't appreciate. Because I say that because somewhere between 85 and 95% of people in the United States believe in God or a higher power of some kind. So I wouldn't push that on anybody else, but I do believe it's also important. It's also worth something. And so I would just like to see a world and a field of psychotherapy where every modality of spirituality could be embraced and accepted and not rejected, including for those who have a theistic view as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why I wanted to start with that, to make sure that everybody who listens to this feels equally welcome, no matter how you identify as atheist or Christian or whatever your beliefs are, or you just like yoga and nature. Everybody's welcome. Everybody can tap into this as something for their recovery. So I know that this is a big question, but for our listeners, can you tell them a little bit about what the research says on why spirituality is important for eating disorder recovery?
The word that comes to mind is disconnection and connection. When people become involved in eating disorder and as the illness develops, not as a matter of conscious decision, it's just part of the nature of the beast. And so as the illness develops, people become disconnected from all those things that are most important in their life. And I'm not saying total disconnection, but a qualitative and significant connection. And the longer and the deeper people are in illness before treatment and recovery, the bigger the disconnect is. And that disconnect is, they become disconnected from their relationships with other people, disconnected from their relationship or connected with their spirituality, whether it's higher power or whether it's a spiritual practice that has nothing to do with the concept of spiritual higher power. They become disconnected from themselves. They become disconnected from their love or compassion or sense of their own goodness. They become disconnected from the passion in their life, the purpose of their life, their dreams, their deepest desires. As they become disconnected from all of the most important things in their life, in illness, they become more and more connected to the illness itself as the center of everything. Their coping mechanism, their way of dealing with life, their way of identifying themselves. So as illness develops, the eating disorder becomes, for people who are in it for a long time, actually their identity. They start believing it's who I am. Well, if that's who I am, then I'm not connected to the truth about who I am, which includes my spiritual self and my spiritual identity, my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, the goodness of my heart, the intentions of my heart, let alone the gifts and talents and the things that I can do. So I think that's one reason why it's so important, is we're trying to get people disconnected from illness one step at a time in every way, whether it's walking away from self-destructive eating behaviors and doing that different, that's one step away from illness. Whether it's, being willing to walk out the door without trying on different clothes 10 times in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's necessarily eating disorder illness, because it's not. But what I'm saying is that maybe 3 times changing clothes would be enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to walk out with that sense of insecurity. Maybe I don't look good enough, but I'm going to walk out anyway. It's disconnecting by talking about our shame, by telling the truth about mistakes, by talking about things that have happened that we didn't get to vote on or have any control over. So it's learning how to express love even when we think our gift might be flawed or broken or not even worth sharing, or asking for help so we can receive love into our life. So every step away from illness is a step into recovery. It's also a step back into self. It's a step back into spirituality and who we truly are. So to me, that's a significant part of treatment. And so as important as evidence-based style treatments are, and they're incredibly crucial, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, ACT, all of these treatments that are a little bit more talking-based and cognitively based are incredibly important, but we have to do that work, and we have to do other work also, which is a deeper work of, it's not so much just about what I think and how I feel, how I modulate feeling, how I cope with feeling, but it's also who am I, and what am I worth, and what do I believe in, and where am I headed, and what really matters to me in my life. And there's a psychiatrist in New York, kind of an old-timer, his name's Ira Sacker, who wrote a book called Reclaiming the Self. And in that book, he said that when people are living their passion, there's not enough room in their life for their eating disorder.
I love that.
And it's not so much a simple thing that if we start doing our passion, it will disappear. It won't. But as we live our passion, our life will begin to have more fulfillment in it. It'll give us more strength and power to do the hard work we have to do, to continue to walk away from illness and walk into something else.
I'm thinking about clients I've worked with in the past who have felt so disconnected from their spirituality or their healthy self or their values that they can't even picture anything outside of life, with this eating disorder really being at the forefront. I'm wondering what you would recommend if somebody wants to try to take a couple first tiny steps toward recovery, toward spirituality or their values, and away from the illness.
Okay, great question. Maybe the first step would be being willing to consider the possibility to maybe have an open heart or an open mind to the idea that spirituality matters, or to the idea that I'm a spiritual being, that I'm spiritual, I have something spiritual to offer, and open to the idea that it's not just relationships, my physical body, my emotion, my mental functioning, but there's a spirituality that is also an important part of me, an important part of my life that I need to attend to and figure out, first of all, what that is for me, and then second of all, what do I need to do to nurture that if I begin to believe in its importance? So believing that it might be important is a first step before we'll be willing to do anything. And after that, maybe being willing to try to do a self-assessment, some self-reflection, try to get some clarity about what is my spirituality. Because a lot of people, you ask them about spirituality, go, I don't even know what that is. If you ask someone who has been in a specific, organized kind of religious faith, they'll have an answer for you. They have a language. They've grown up in this community where it's easy for them to talk about. And then some of people have not stayed with that and they've walked away from it. And then they have to figure out, well, what's my spirituality now? And sometimes people need a language that they can talk. So being willing to create and start a language for it is an important thing too. And we can do that in simple ways. One thing is we could read some spiritual material from different frameworks and then do an exploration, say, how do I feel when I read this? Do I agree with what these people are saying? Does that kind of hit me as truth when I read that, when I hear that? To be willing to do a little seeking and searching could be a great thing. One thing I do to assess with my patients who say, I don't even know what that is I have a list of quotes from about 18 different spiritual frameworks from famous people, and Dalai Lama, a Christian quote, just different people. And I'll read it out loud and I'll ask them, when I'm done reading this, I want you to let me know. Just pay attention to your heart. Let me know what resonates with you. And then I read them, and then they'll come back and say, I love that one quote. I'll say, well, why does that mean something to you? Or how does that connect with your life or with you, heart? And then they start talking about it. And then all of a sudden they begin to see, I do have a spiritual framework. I do have some spiritual beliefs. Another easy self-assessment is to consider spiritual heroes. If you ask somebody, even if we don't have a clear definition, you don't in your mind about what spirituality is, could you just tell me who in your mind or in your life do you consider to be a spiritual hero? It can be a spiritual icon, Mother Teresa.
That's mine.
Gandhi, whoever it is. Or it could be a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a partner, a spouse. It could be a stranger that you saw on the street do something. You don't even know who that person is, so it doesn't have to be an icon. It could be the most common person. But who's a spiritual hero for you? And almost all people can come up with someone. And then if you ask them, well, why are they a spiritual hero to you? What is it about them that draws you to them, that makes you say they might be a spiritual person or spiritual hero? And they'll immediately start saying, well, one time I saw them do this, or I love the way they talk about this, or I love the way they treat these people. And immediately as we begin to dissect and describe and illuminate the character, the behavior of our spiritual heroes, it begins to lay out for us, in front of us, our spiritual framework and our spiritual beliefs. And then I actually believe, I don't have any research to back this up, but
That's okay.
I truly believe that the reason why we're attracted to some people as spiritual heroes is because we are like them in some way. There's something about us, our character, our spirits, our souls, our nature, whatever you want to call it, that is attracted to them because there's similarities. And it might be that we see ourselves as having a little bit of this. We might consider our heroes have a bunch of that or whatever, but most people, if they really give themselves permission to see any goodness inside of themselves, they can begin to see, yeah. And it may not be, and it won't be that I've mastered these spiritual characteristics or the living of spiritual principles, but it may be that is what I want. This is what I believe in. This is the intent of my heart. This is where I'm headed in my own personal spiritual development. And then people can begin to have some clarity around that.
That's really interesting, because mine is definitely Mother Teresa, even though I would never venture to say I'm anywhere on that level.
Right.
But there are a lot of things about her life that I really value and try to live, that, of course, when I had an eating disorder, got in the way. Like, you can't be of service to other people when you're really sick.
Right.
And then my other spiritual hero is my golden retriever. And that's
Yeah.
because he's so different from how I am wired, because he's so joyful and open and has no reservations. And I'm very cautious.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to be incredibly serious about it either. Every day when I see my golden retriever, I'm like, yes, I could be a little bit more joyful like you. I would do
That's
it.
the cool thing about it, is what you see in your golden retriever is a part of you that you're developing, that you want to develop.
It's definitely in progress.
Right. I mean, no, I think that's really cool. One more thought I had was just that sometimes we can provide a little language. For example, I'll just give you two examples. One is that sometimes in my spirituality groups, I run one spirituality group at our treatment center a week, and that's it. The spirituality pieces of our program are small, but it's more a safety thing where people can live their spirituality and talk about it and include it in treatment if they want to, without fear of being made fun of or being rejected or anything like that. But sometimes I'll bring up a topic like, let's talk about faith and what does that have to do with recovery. And initially, the people who are on the more non-religious side are like, faith, don't please,
use that F word.
Don't talk to us about, don't make us talk about faith. But my thing is that, like I said, faith is not a religious construct only. It's a spiritual construct. And what I teach is that if you didn't have faith, you wouldn't be here. If you didn't believe that if I walked into this office and let someone get to know me and begin to have a relationship with someone that might help me move towards recovery, you wouldn't have even come in for treatment. You wouldn't have got up in the morning. You wouldn't have came to work. If you didn't believe you couldn't make it to work safely, you wouldn't have got inside of your car. So faith is an incredibly powerful spiritual concept that our patients need to be aware of. It's not a matter of trying to help them have more faith. That's not it. That might be a Sunday school lesson somewhere, but that's not what we're talking about. Really what we're talking about is helping them understand how much faith they have, how much courage they have, how much hope they have, and what drives them. But that's a language that they can use. So as people progress in their illness, again, accidentally and not on purpose, no one would do this. But it's the nature of the illness itself that as it develops, people begin to put more faith in the illness, and they're not as connected to the faith they have in other things. Their family, love, the future, recovery, their higher power, whatever that is. And so I often tell them, if you're going to withdraw faith out of illness and not have faith in the illness to take care of you and get you what you need in your life and have the safety and comfort that you're looking for, if you're going to put faith in something else, where you're going to put it.
That's really
It's a conscious choice. Where will I put my faith and how will that serve me in recovery? My dietitian, my therapist, my treatment team, my family who love me, these people, I will choose where I put my faith. And that gives a lot of power. And if you put faith in something, then what do? You take steps in it. You face fear in it. You start walking down that pathway and see how that goes for you. And so that idea of language, we can help patients consider a language, help them find their own language. We can help them practice their spirituality, because it's not just beliefs, it's the practice of it. Like one of my patients who said that nature was kind of the center of her spiritual beliefs. And I said, well, what do? She said, well, I like to go on hikes up in the mountains. I said, well, when's the last time you took a hike up in the mountain? 5 years ago. And I'm like, well, if this is the center of your spiritual practice, why don't you do it? So that's part of this idea of spirituality in life and in recovery and in treatment, is it's the practice of it. If you believe in being in nature, then spend time in nature the best you can. Find some time. Be congruent. Honor those beliefs. Honor what helps you. If it's doing yoga, then do your yoga. And if it's serving people, then serve people. If it's saying prayers, then say your prayers. And if that's not it, then don't pretend it is. Quit telling people, this is my spiritual belief and this is my spiritual practice. So it's also a way for people to consider, this is what I say, this is what I do, this is what I've been taught, but what's the truth about where I really sit? Because part of the development of spiritual self and then beyond that spiritual practice is to begin to ponder, what have I been given, what have I been taught, what do I embrace, what have I internalized, and what is it for me? Because we can't just hold on to what mom and dad said. You get what I'm saying?
I think
we know what they said, but what are you going to take from what you've been taught by teachers and therapists and parents and friends and whoever else? What are you going to take? You take it into your heart and your life as your own. I integrate this, I accept it, I embrace it, I live it. It's my truth. It's the way it is for me. And then which parts of what we're exposed to out there do we say, no, I'm not doing that. That's not for me. That's not what I want. And that's the process of growing up, right? But when people are trying to recover from illness, in my opinion, if it also becomes part of the process of recovery, then people can be stronger. So we all know that if we help patients find reasons for recovery, that's important, right? And any reason's a great reason. If a 13-year-old will eat a little food so she can ride her horse on Saturday, have her eat the food and make sure she gets on that horse. That's fantastic. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Any reason is a great reason. And reasons develop and reasons grow upon reasons. Sometimes patients will begin to take, like one of my recent patients came into inpatient treatment. I said, why did you come? Why did you agree to this? She said, I'm tired of hurting my mom and dad. I love my parents. And I just simply said, well, instead of saying, well, if you don't do it for you, you're never going to get better, which is what people told me when I was trying to recover from drug and alcohol addiction. What I told her was, I said, you're honorable, you're kind, and you're loving. That's incredible. You love your parents that much that you would face this fear and take a step. I think that's fantastic. And then what I said to her is, it's going to be not only interesting, but a lot of fun to find out all the other reasons that you have and that you're going to have for transcending this illness and getting well over time. So we start where we are, and then we build on that over time. And then, like for my own recovery, drug and alcohol, when I started in recovery, I hated myself with a passion. I didn't think I was worth anything. But I knew my children were, and I knew my wife was, and I loved them. So I just started there. And now, I'm 33 years in recovery. I'm 63 years old. Now I also know there's thousands of reasons to stay in recovery. And I'm one of them now. I deserve better. I deserve freedom. I want something more in my life than that. So I guess back to spirituality is that if we can, any reason's a great reason, but some of the most impelling and powerful reasons will be connected to our spirituality, our integrity, our sense of character about who we are. Like if you want to start a fight in a room, just start talking about religion or spirituality or politics. And all of these things are deeply seated in people's values, their priorities. The deepest desires they have are wrapped up in that stuff. And so if we can help people get connected to their deepest beliefs about self, about other people, about what life's about what my calling is, the purpose of my life, and about finding joy. And even if we don't know what our calling is, even if we don't have something we're real passionate about, to learn to have passion about what we're doing instead of something that's out there all the time, But if we can hook people into that, then they have more of a reason to get well that really drives people. Because I do believe the vast majority of all human beings They want to do the right thing. They want to make a difference in their own life and grow and develop and become who they can be. And they want to help other people on their path. So if we can tap into that, we can help people get well.
So I wanted to ask, and you absolutely don't have to answer this. We can just cut it out if you don't want to. But how'd you become so interested in spirituality and recovery?
I really think it was my own addiction and then recovery, because I had some spiritual experiences that helped me in my path. So I may have you cut this out, but anyway, I don't know, but I'll just tell you two little things about that. First of all, when I was doing hard drugs, I went home one night. I was married and I had a little son. And I went home, I picked up my little boy, and I had this spiritual experience. It's kind of hard to explain, but this very strong, powerful message came to me. And I honestly do not remember if it was a voice outside of myself or in my mind or in my heart, but it was very loud and it was very clear. And I heard this 3 times, and it said, "This little boy deserves better than this. This little boy deserves better than this." And I heard that 3 times, and it just hit me like a freight train. And in that moment, I realized, in that moment, I knew the worth and value of my son. I knew that I loved him, and I knew that I would get better and do it different. So that was the beginning of my journey out of drugs. And later, as most addicts do, as I got away from drugs over time, and I started drinking more, and I already had an alcohol problem, but my alcohol problem was completely out of control, but I was no longer using hard drugs. To me, that was a great step in the right direction. But I had a similar kind of spiritual experience about my wife. This time the message to me was, it was so clear, she shouldn't have to do this. She shouldn't have to do this. And I really love her. And I loved her then, and I still do. And I just thought, no, I can't make her do this. So, again, just started working harder, tried taking steps. It took a while to get out, so eventually I was able to climb out. So that's kind of the starting. So part of my desire to help people comes from my own struggle, making dumb decisions, making unhealthy decisions, making mistakes, and being stuck in addiction. And I always thought if I could help others avoid that, the pain and suffering that I went through, and more importantly, the pain and suffering my family, my parents, my siblings, my spouse, they were going through, then I would want to help people do that different. I wanted to give back, basically, help people in some way. So that's part of what has driven me to do this work, and part of what has driven me to stick with spirituality is because I know that it's important. It's important to me. I figure it might be important to others, so I don't choose to push my personal spiritual beliefs on other people. I think that's wrong. But I do feel, I've always felt a desire to ask people to take a look and see if spiritual things could be a blessing in their life too. Has been in mine, if it could be a blessing in recovery. So that's another part of it. The other part is that I've always detested this fake and false dichotomy and division between science and spirituality, and what happened in the olden days where it was said that the primary cause of mental illness is religion. And I've always thought, well, of course, people in the name of religion do wrong things. They've done bad things. People are killing people in the name of religion around the world right now as we speak. And there is a downside to perfectionism and false guilt and oppression and just all kinds of stuff. But on the other hand, to say that that is the cause of all mental illness when, in all actuality, for many people in the world, whether it's a religious brand of spirituality or it's practicing Eastern religious concepts of connectedness and mindfulness and all of that, has been a blessing to people throughout, since the beginning of time, since the beginning of humanity. And so I just feel to get rid of this false division and say science matters and scientific thought, research, studies matter, but there's a spiritual side too. So why don't we blend these two together?
I agree.
So that's kind of what I've always believed in. So it's more my own personal thing, is just I like to write about it, I like to do research about it, I like to speak about it, explore that. So
I'm glad you did, and thank you for telling us about your personal experiences with that. It's really meaningful to me and everybody who's listening today. But I guess I also wanted to just compliment you on, I've always found the way that you talk about spirituality very compelling and really easily accessible, no matter what framework or no framework people are coming from. And I really just wanted to kind of continue to emphasize that. I think you've made that really clear in talking today, but it doesn't matter what your framework is, we can work with that. Like, I'm thinking of a client I had who identified as very strongly atheist and did not believe that there's anything after this life. And then our discussion was like, whoa, if this is it, and this is like your one shot, like, is this what you want to be doing with it? Like having this eating disorder.
Right.
So I just think you do a really good job of making sure everybody is welcome in that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had similar experience with a lot of atheistic people who found their spirituality and do a lot of humanitarian work, serve people, find a way to make the world a better place, and found a lot of power in that, and a lot of joy in that in their personal life as well. So,
Can I ask you one more question before we wrap up?
Yeah.
I always try to end the episodes with guests, especially with giving something to think about and giving some people something to feel hopeful about. So after working with hundreds, if not thousands of patients at this point, seeing so many people recover, would you talk a little bit about why you think people can have hope and place some faith in having hope that recovery can happen?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind right at the moment is, if I can do it, you can do it. If I could do it, anybody can do it. Anyone.
That's how I feel too.
Even I did it. Even I, did it. So if I can transcend addiction, the addictive process, then anyone can. So I truly believe in the eating disorder world, in full recovery, never to go back, completely gone, is very possible and very likely for most of our patients. And so I really do have a lot of hope. I believe in hope, and I believe that's the most important things we could ever give our clients, is the truth about that they can get better. Not every single person will get better, tragically. There are some that will pass away. There are some that will make some progress, but there will be pieces of their illness as they trudge on in life. There are some mental illnesses where you don't completely get better, but you learn how to manage it. You learn how to have a lot of joy and fulfillment and enjoy your life in many wonderful, lovely ways. So my message is, there's a high probability that you can get better. So do it. Fight for it. It takes a while. The most important ingredient is don't give up. Keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. Stand up and go again. If you find yourself faltering, go back in treatment again. Reach out for help. Don't try to do it alone. That's extremely important. None of us are going to be able to do this hard work by ourselves. We're going to need good people to help us, and we have good people around us. We have to ask for it. Keep going. And also I would say that you have a lot to give. You have, you're wonderful, you're spiritual, you're lovely, you have good heart. Give your gift. Love people. Do what you want to do. Follow your passion. Follow your purpose. Learn how to appreciate where you are in your life and what you're doing right now. Because wherever you are, the place you're at, and what you are doing does have purpose. It does make a difference. there is something important about it. It might be where you're supposed to be right now, but there is a pathway, and we can walk down a path. We can find ourselves and create different situations for ourselves as well on top of that. So that's kind of
well said.
What I would say.
It's been an honor talking with you today. Thank you so much for chatting with us, giving us all your insight on spirituality and recovery. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And I want to honor you and just say, no, truly, just what you're doing in your practice and what you're doing with this podcast has touched thousands and thousands of lives, and bringing good information for people to ponder and consider. And you are the catalyst for this. And so what you're doing is, I think it's miraculous.
Thanks.
And I think it's wonderful. And I've always felt the only thing I have to offer is what I know. I don't claim it to be truth. It's just what I know. So I put it out there. It's my little contribution. And if one person gets one thing out of what I'm saying that might help them a little bit in their life, then great. Fantastic. Yeah. I would feel fantastic. And I've appreciated the opportunity to learn from people and be uplifted by one thing somebody said that made a difference in my life. So I'm trying to contribute to that. And I appreciate your own words of wisdom, and then the gathering of others, that we would have this opportunity to say a few words to good people out there fighting for recovery. So
thanks.
Thank you.
It's always an honor to be a part of the ripple effect of recovery.
It is.
Thanks for joining me for another episode. Let's keep in touch. You can find all the information you need about the podcast at eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com, including full podcast episodes and links to all of our social media sites. You can join our Facebook group for the podcast by searching Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast on Facebook. This is a closed group for listeners of the podcast looking to connect, share resources, and get involved in a pro-recovery community. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. Talk to you next time on the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.